What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. You guys already know what it is. It's draft season all year long, and today we have a full 2023 first round mock draft with trades, the first one on the channel. This is supposed to be the post Super Bowl mock draft, but we are like a week late, so excuse me for that. But if you guys are interested in anything related to the NFL draft, this is definitely going to be the channel for you, so consider hitting that subscribe button. We are on the road to 600 subscribers, and without further ado, let's get this thing started. So, the Chicago Bears are on the clock here with the number one overall pick. And I've seen so many mock drafts where the Indianapolis Colts jump over the Houston Texans and get that first overall pick to get their franchise quarterback. However, I do feel like the Houston Texans are better suited to make a better trade package than the Indianapolis Colts. They have 2 first-round picks this year, 2 first-round picks next year in the trade that they made with the Cleveland Browns, where the Browns acquired Deshaun Watson. So I feel like they have more draft ammunition, and it's more enticing because they have a better pick here at number 2 overall. I think that they could put together a really good draft package, and it would allow them to pick their quarterback and prevent a division rival in the Indianapolis Colts from getting their franchise quarterback with the number 1 overall pick. So I think this makes a ton of sense here, and would also make a ton of sense for Chicago because they would still have their option at the number 1 defensive player on their board, Will Anderson, Jalen Carter most likely. So we are going to make this trade, and it is going to look very unrealistic, but just for the sake of this website that we're on, the NFL mock draft database simulator, we have to do this because they only allow fair trades to go through, as it says it's accepted by both parties. So realistically, I think Houston here would give up their first round pick this year, their first round pick next year, and then maybe an early pick like a second or a third rounder, and then maybe some change here in the later rounds. And it seems like a lot to move up from number 2 to number 1. But you have to keep in mind that they are also competing with a division rival in the Indianapolis Colts, who are probably going to put together a really good draft package themselves to try and move up to the number 1 overall pick. So they have to compete with that because at the end of the day, Chicago doesn't care who gets the quarterback. They just want a good trade package at the end of the day. So Houston would have to compete for that. But that's what I think would be a realistic trade there for the number 1 overall pick. We're going to start this draft, and here the Houston Texans go ahead and get Bryce Young. This is my number 1 quarterback in this year's draft. I think he's the most composed, one of the more skilled quarterbacks in this year's draft, obviously. But he's got a cannon of an arm. He's got the athletic ability. He plays the best under the bright lights in the big moments, and is also a Heisman Trophy winner. So he's accomplished a lot in his time at Alabama. I think he is a great quarterback. Despite him being shorter than you would like your quarterback to be in the NFL, I still think that he's done enough on tape to prove that he is the best quarterback in this year's draft. And I think that this would be a game-changing move here for the Houston Texans if they can acquire this number 1 overall pick and get the quarterback of their choice here with the number 1 selection. Now, for the Chicago Bears, this is a win-win trade for both parties because Chicago, still gets to pick their favorite defensive player in this year's draft, whether it's Will Anderson or Jalen Carter, and they don't have to worry about who Arizona takes if they were to make a trade with the Indianapolis Colts. So I think that this is something that could really, really happen, and I don't think enough people are talking about. So Chicago here is going to get Will Anderson. Now, I understand so many of you guys like Jalen Carter, and so do I. I mean, it's close. I mean, just as it is for Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud, 1A, 1B. I would say the same thing for Anderson and Carter, 1A and 1B at the defensive spot here overall. So for Will Anderson, I just think that not only does he do such a great job, being disruptive in the pass game, but he's also a very, very good run stopper. And, maybe you can make the argument that he's a better run stopper than he's a pass rusher. But the point is that overall, just a very, very solid prospect, one that's going to be disruptive, and I think one that is certainly going to be franchise-changing. Not saying that Jalen Carter isn't any of those things as well, but I think that the edge rusher position is just going to be more valued at this point than the defensive interior. But, Will Anderson, I mean, this is one of my favorite prospects in a long time, I think, at the defensive line spot. So really excited to see what he does. Hopefully not against my Minnesota Vikings, but would be a home run of a pick here for the Chicago Bears. Now, we are going to have our second trade go through here. Now, if I do look down at my phone, it's because I did put a lot of time into thinking, who selects who, what trades are going to happen where. And with this pick right here, we are going to have the Indianapolis Colts trade up with the Arizona Cardinals here, just one spot for this number 3 overall pick. Now, some of you guys might be scratching your head saying like, okay, this doesn't quite make a ton of sense. But again, same thought process as Houston trading up to prevent Indianapolis from trading up. I think this could be a spot here where some quarterback needy teams or teams that are just interested in taking a quarterback could potentially jump the Indianapolis Colts here and try and get their quarterback before Indianapolis can snag him. So here it's just playing some defense here in the draft for Indianapolis. And obviously you saw there we gave up like a first and a second for this first round pick. That is something that I could potentially see going through, especially if no one else is competing for it. But let's just say you have a team like the Raiders or the Panthers trying to trade up for this pick. You could see 2 first-round picks package, this one from this year, and then, of course, the one from next year following, and then maybe some change as well in the late rounds. But Indianapolis really has to be afraid of a team jumping them when Arizona's picking there at number 3, I think, when Houston trades up to number 1 for their quarterback. So this is just a safety pick, making sure that they get their guy. And I think they'd be more than happy to do it, you know. And they're going to go ahead here and take Will Levis. Will Levis, not CJ Stroud. Try to psych you guys out a little bit there. I think Indianapolis is going to go in here and try and bank on the upside of a player. Now, you watch Will Levis, and it is a roller coaster. I mean, the highs are really high, and, you know, you watch a compilation of his highlights, and it's like, damn, this dude looks really good. And if he plays like this all the time, he is going to be unstoppable. But then you watch a regular Kentucky game, and you see all the throws that he makes throughout the game. It's not very impressive. I mean, the lows are very low, but I think that he's an extremely talented player nonetheless, probably the best arm in this year's draft. So you're really banking on the upside on this one, where if he plays at that high level, as I mentioned before, this can be a really, really good quarterback, but we haven't seen that yet. So it's a big if, right? But the Indianapolis Colts, I think, again, bank on the upside here, and they are going to go with Will Levis out of Kentucky. Again, he's not my favorite guy just because he's very 50-50. Like, you don't know how he's going to play from week to week. So you're really just banking on the development of this player right here. But I don't know. Do you guys think that him putting mayo in his coffee is a sign? I don't know. We could look at this 3-4 years from now and say, man, he put mayo in his coffee. We should have known he wasn't going to be good. But you never know. It's all jokes. It's all jokes at the end of the day. Now here for the Arizona Cardinals, they can trade down and still get the best defensive player on the board here in Jalen Carter, here out of Georgia. And I think Jonathan Gannon, the new head coach for the Arizona Cardinals, would absolutely love this pick because right here is his run stopper, which, you know, Philadelphia wasn't horrible at it. That was a spot that they could definitely improve, but they didn't really have dudes in the middle that were really stopping the run as they would have liked to. And so having Jalen Carter to secure that spot there early on in his tenure here at Arizona to just solidify that middle, be a huge run stopper, and also be disruptive in the pass game, which isn't a super common trait for a prospect coming out of the draft from the defensive interior spot. So Jalen Carter is just an all-around good prospect. You know, if Arizona gets Jalen Carter or Will Anderson, I think Gannon would be happy either way as a defensive-minded head coach. Now, we're going to go ahead here and make our third trade here. Very, very active in the trading department here in the 2023 NFL Draft. So what we're going to do here is we are going to have the Carolina Panthers trade up to the number 5 overall pick with the Seattle Seahawks, and they are going to go and get their franchise quarterback here, if I can find the two teams right here. So right here, we're going to have 1, and then I believe it was this 2 for this one. Yeah, okay. So that's what's going to happen here. And they're going to go ahead and take their quarterback, as I mentioned before. Now, what is a realistic trade package? Again, similar to the ones that I mentioned before. So it's going to be 2 first-round draft picks, not what you just saw on the board. That was just for the sake of it going through on this website. We are going to have 2 first-round picks here for the Carolina Panthers given up. So their first-rounder, obviously, from this year, and then their first-rounder from next year. And then I think you could see them giving up an early draft pick, like a second or a third, and then also some change. So very similar to what we saw with the Houston Texans trading up to the number 1 overall spot with the Chicago Bears. So here we go. Carolina wants to make sure that they get their quarterback. Sam Darnold's going to be a free agent this year. Don't think he should be the quarterback anyway, but they can go ahead here and snag CJ Stroud here with the number 5 overall pick. Make sure that they get their guy. Jumping teams like Detroit, who could potentially be taking a quarterback, even the Raiders, who don't have a quarterback at this point in time. So they get their guy for the future. And Frank Reich actually has a young quarterback with a ton of talent to work with because he had Carson Wentz, Phillip Rivers. You know, it's just that's not good for him. So they have to give him a legit chance with the quarterback that they want. And C.J. Stroud, I think they would be more than happy to have a dude who really showed off that he can use his wheels if you let him in that final game that he played against Georgia in the semifinal game, but also is super accurate with the football. I think this is a really good quarterback prospect right here. And like I said, 1A, 1B with Bryce Young. I do lean a little bit more towards Bryce Young, but C.J. Stroud, I mean, he has all the tools he needs to be successful. So I think that this would be a great pick for the Carolina Panthers. Trading up, securing their guy for the future there at number 5 overall. And we move on here to the Detroit Lions. Again, if you see me looking down, I did make these picks beforehand. Obviously, I don't want to wing this thing. I wanted to put a lot of thought and effort into this mock draft, so we're not winging this thing. But here with the number 6 overall pick, the Detroit Lions, absolute luxury to be picking up here, considering that they are trending upwards. They are going in the right direction. Usually drafting here because they suck, but that is not the case. That's because the Rams sucked this year. And we are going to go ahead and give them my number 1 cornerback in this year's draft in Devin Witherspoon. This is a phenomenal cornerback prospect, and I just think that his ability to cover ground really quickly and, just has really good makeup speed is a huge plus for him right now. And he is slightly on the smaller side at 180 pounds as he's listed right now, but that never really seemed to be a problem in his time at Illinois. Never really got out physical. Just a really solid cornerback, really good ball skills, and I think just tremendous footwork. I think he has good hip work as well. I really like Devin Witherspoon. I mean, I think this is one of the guys I'm fairly certain is going to be a good player in the NFL draft, hence why we're taking him here in the top 10. But I hear so much hype about guys, as we see on the board right here, in Christian Gonzalez and Joey Porter, but I don't think, I don't know if Devin Witherspoon's not getting talked enough because he might be a consensus number 1 cornerback here in this year's draft. But, I mean, for me, I can say with confidence that this is my favorite cornerback in this year's draft for those reasons. I mean, even when he messes up, I mean, he still has an opportunity to make a huge play. So I really like Devin Witherspoon out of Illinois. Huge pickup here for the Detroit Lions, who are going to be very thin at cornerback if they don't pick up any free agents or re-sign guys. I can't imagine Oruwariye is going to come back. I can't imagine they'll sign back Mike Hughes, who's their slot cornerback. So you're just going to be left with Jeff Okudah after that and whoever else you acquire here in the offseason. So this would be a huge pickup here at number 6 overall. Now, here for the Las Vegas Raiders, I'm just going to have them projected to take a quarterback in free agency or trade for one, a veteran quarterback. I don't think that they're going to go the route of a rookie quarterback at this point in time. So, I don't know. Let's just throw a name out there. Maybe Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy Garoppolo has his ties to Josh McDaniels in their time back in New England. I'm not saying he's going to get signed there, but, it's possible. So, maybe they go out here and sign a free agent and don't have to worry about the quarterback position at least this year in the draft, considering that the top 3 guys are already off the board. And we are going to go ahead here and take Christian Gonzalez here out of Oregon. I think that they need to shore up that outside cornerback spot. And now, I know there's going to be a lot of Raiders fans who are like, okay, there are so many other positions that we need to address. But I just feel like you're sitting here at the top of the board, and I think you just got to take one of the better players available and one that can make an immediate impact. And that's exactly what Christian Gonzalez is going to do here for the Raiders. Now, I do like the tackle prospects in this year's draft. I don't feel super strongly about them, which is why I don't want to take them here in the top 10. But I think that, the Raiders are a team who could potentially trade up into the late first round or even trade up early on in day 2 in the second round and pick up a really quality tackle at that point in the draft as well. I'm really high on guys like Darnell Wright, and I know that hasn't really been projected into the first round, so that's potentially a guy that they could slip in there and pick up in the second round. So Christian Gonzalez is going to shore up a relatively weak secondary, but like I said, instant impact player. He's going to play immediately, and I just think it's a great selection here at the number 7 overall pick. You don't reach for any of these players. You really just take the best player available, rock with him, and hope that he's going to be productive, and that's exactly what we're doing here. In that thought process, taking Christian Gonzalez here for the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, here for number 8, we are going to take Tyree Wilson out of Texas Tech here for Atlanta. He's my number 2 edge rusher in this year's class, obviously behind Will Anderson. But Tyree Wilson, we're just banking on his physical traits and just the upside, sort of like Will Levis in a way. I mean, but Tyree Wilson has an extremely long wingspan, right, due to standing at 6'6", and around 275 pounds, and has a ton of versatility, has a fair share of snaps on the outside as well as on the defensive interior. And so very interesting to see what kind of role that he could potentially be playing for the Atlanta Falcons here in 2023. And for a team who desperately needs some pass rush presence aside from Grady Jarrett, I mean, this is going to be a player who is going to be playing instantly, and I think will make a huge impact. Maybe not in year one, but sometime down the road. I mean, this is going to be a very young duo with Tyree Wilson and Arnold Ebiketie, two guys that you're really banking on their upside. So I really like if Atlanta could try and youth up that position and be more productive at that spot as well. Now here, the Seattle Seahawks picking here at number 9 when they traded their number 5 overall pick away to the Carolina Panthers, got some more draft capital. And what we're going to go ahead and do here is take Myles Murphy here out of Clemson. Now, this is a very physical football player who can also win with speed. Now, the reason why I have him here as my number 3 edge rusher, not my number 2, is because I think he does a great job, just overall. But I think I need to see more consistency out of him. And I also want to see more pass rush moves added to his arsenal. Now, that could simply be done with great coaching, right? But I just do like the upside of Tyree Wilson a little more, and I think you kind of already know what you have in Myles Murphy. I don't think he's going to get much better than what we've already seen him be in college, and so that's why I'm not as high on him as I am with Tyree Wilson. But this would still be a great pick for Seattle, who desperately needs some pass rush as well, and they can pair him up with the Uchenna Nwosu, and I think that this would be a great pick. Now, some of you guys may be screaming like, oh my God, no, we need that defensive interior player here. I don't know, someone like Bryan Bresee. But Bryan Bresee, I don't think he's going to go as high as he initially was mocked in earlier mock drafts. I mean, I've seen him just slipping, which I understand. Probably not worth a top 10 pick, but certainly someone worth taking in the first round. Is going to be a very productive player in the NFL, in my opinion. But you need to just address this defense some way. Edge rusher is a huge need for the Seattle Seahawks team, and I think Myles Murphy is a guy where you can take him here at number 9 and feel pretty safe about it because, again, very physical football player. And in a way, you're sort of banking on his upside and just learning more techniques to get to the quarterback. But, again, as I mentioned, very, very close call between him and Tyree Wilson out of Texas Tech. Now, here for the Philadelphia Eagles, we're going to go ahead and take a cornerback here. We're going to take Joey Porter out of Penn State, and this is another guy where you're banking on his upside. This is the fun thing about this year's draft, right? There's not a lot of guys who are like super polished players, as we've seen in previous drafts and more recent drafts, but these are a lot of guys where it's like, not crazy production in their time at college, but are very skilled players, right? And I think Joey Porter is sort of in that category right now where he can be a really good player if he can put all of his talents together. But this is a team that has a lot of departing free agents, and I don't know if James Bradbury is going to be a guy that they're going to be returning to the team this next season. So Joey Porter would sure up that cornerback spot. You'd have Slay, Porter, and then Avonte Maddox in the slot. They have so many free agents. I mean, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, T.J. Edwards, James Bradbury, the list goes on, and they're not going to be able to bring back everyone, and so you're going to have to address one of those positions. I think cornerback is definitely going to be a spot where you can take a good player at a good value at this spot, and Joey Porter here, the number 10 overall pick in Philadelphia, would be more than happy to have him on the team, keep him in Pennsylvania for another 4 to 5 years, maybe even more. Now here for the Tennessee Titans here, they desperately need to get a tackle in this year's draft. I mean, they need to protect the quarterback, whether it's Ryan Tannehill, maybe it's Malik Willis. I don't know. He didn't look that great. But they need to go out and get a tackle to protect whoever it is at quarterback. I think Petit Friere is going to get another shot at it starting. I think he was pretty solid considering he was taken in the 3rd round. And there are rumors swirling around that, Taylor Lewan is most likely going to get cut by the Tennessee Titans. And so even more so, they need to go and get that offensive tackle now. So I'm going to go ahead and give them my number 1 offensive tackle prospect in this year's draft, and that's going to be Anton Harrison out of Oklahoma. Now, again, banking on the upside of this guy, I think when you watch the highest of highs from his tape, this dude looks like an unstoppable force, obviously. And there are some really good players in this year's draft, like Peter Skoronski, even Darnell Wright. Those two guys give up like the lowest sack numbers in college football coming out of this year's draft. But Anton Harrison, like I said, you're banking on the upside. I think this is going to be the most physical offensive lineman. And look, this is a word that is used so often in commentary in football or just analysis, physicality. And it's a real thing. I mean, the teams that out-physical other teams are the ones that give their teams the best chance to win week after week. And I think that Anton Harrison is one of those, like, those maulers, those bullies in the trenches that is really going to set the tone for the offensive line. So I think Anton Harrison, right, he puts the pieces together. I think this is going to be a very, very good offensive tackle and one that they could potentially have on the team for the next 10 years. I really, really like Anton Harrison. And again, as I mentioned before, I'm banking on his upside here. Now, for the Houston Texans here, this is their second first-round pick, and again, as I mentioned before, they're not going to give up this pick. They're going to give up a first-round pick from next year's draft so that they can keep this pick here at number 12 overall, and I think that the Chicago Bears would be content with that. Now, here with this number 12 overall pick, we are going to go ahead here and take Quentin Johnston out of TCU. Excuse me. Quentin Johnston, very, very interesting prospect in my opinion. It's just like it's hot and cold at times, and I think that this is a really, really good prospect where, he can go up for a pass and make that jump ball play because of his size and his height, but then also is really good at run after the catch. But then there's games where just he might get clamped up here and there, and so that's what's a little bit concerning with Quentin Johnston. We're I'm not super sold on him, but Houston needs to get a wide receiver here for Bryce Young. I mean, you have Quentin Johnston, and then, hopefully you have John Mechie come back. He's, in a very unfortunate situation now, so prayers up for him, continuing for him, as we found out the bad news last year. But I seriously think that this team needs another weapon, because Brandon Cooks is also not going to be here as well this next season. So I think they need to make it an emphasis to get their young quarterback a serious weapon, and that's what we're going to go ahead and do here with Quentin Johnston. Again, I mean, this is a common theme as I really think about it here in this year's draft, where a lot of these guys are just banking on their upside, right? And you could say that that's the same thing for every draft, but there's a lot of drafts where, you look at these players and oh yeah, plug in and play, these dudes are going to be absolute dogs. I can't say the same thing about this year's draft, where it's it's a wild card with a lot of these guys, and I think Quentin Johnston is an exception to that as well. So certain things that I think he could work on in his game, where it's just he's a really physical dude, but I think he needs to be more physical. At the line of scrimmage, I saw Keely Ringo absolutely body him in the national championship game, so that's something that I would want to see him do a little bit more. And again, just more consistency throughout the entire course of a football game. Now, here for the New York Jets, they need to go out and get a tackle as well right here, specifically a left tackle. You got Mekhi Becton on the right side. Hopefully he can stay healthy. We're going to go ahead and take Peter Skoronski here. Now, the huge knock on him right now is that he has really short arms, and if I'm not mistaken, I saw on the NFL Draft Buzz website, I believe it was, his projected arm length is in the 1 percentile. So that's really concerning for certain teams, because if you don't have the physical traits, then, what are you going to do about it? You can't teach physical traits. You're not going to teach him to make his arms longer, is the point I'm trying to make. But really productive player at Northwestern. And this is a guy who gave up one of the lowest pressure numbers in all of college football. This is a struggling Northwestern team as well, but he really excelled at his position. If you've been watching the channel, you notice that I use the term smart player. I mean, I think Peter Skoronski is one of the smarter players in this year's draft and really understands his role on the offensive line. But they seriously need a left tackle. They can't keep rotating through these veteran guys here at the left tackle spot. And so we're going to go ahead and get the young franchise tackle here out of Northwestern. Rashawn Slater was out of Northwestern, and he's doing himself a pretty good job when he's on the field, of course. But, yeah, if that's any indication of what a Northwestern offensive tackle provides for you, I think Peter Skoronski can be pretty good. But, not taking away anything from him, I think he's a really solid dude on his own regardless. Now, here for the New England Patriots, they also need to go ahead and get an offensive tackle. Trent Brown is probably not going to be there, and neither is Isaiah Wynn. Just very mediocre season from both of them. We're going to go ahead and take Paris Johnson here out of Ohio State. Now, did I just, kick my desk? Yes, I did. Sorry about that. Paris Johnson, really big size dude there out of Ohio State. I am not super high on Paris Johnson. I don't think he was consistent enough, but I think, he's a very physically gifted dude, as is his counterpart at Ohio State and DeJuan Jones, who's also in this draft. So for a team who desperately needs a tackle, I think this is the route that we're going to go here. And this might sound stupid, okay, and if it is, then, I mean, you can go ahead and do that and think whatever you want. But I think they're going to refrain from taking Broderick Jones because Isaiah Wynn was also a tackle coming out of Georgia. And I'm not saying that, because these guys go to the same school, they're going to have the same type of careers. No, that's not true. But I think they're going to refrain from that just because they tried that experiment with a Georgia tackle before. I think they are going to be a little bit hesitant and a little bit more scared to do the same thing again because of what happened with the Isaiah Wynn experiment. And so I think they're going to go ahead and take Paris Johnson. But I think in many people's eyes, Paris Johnson is already the better prospect anyway, just because, as I mentioned before, that physicality, he provides more of that than Broderick Jones does. Broderick Jones is more of an agile, get him out in space, athletic type of offensive lineman. Not sure that that's the type of build that New England wants to get in the building here at number 14 overall. Now here for the Green Bay Packers, again, this is a team that we always think should be taking some sort of offensive weapon here, and they probably should because Jordan Love is going to be their quarterback this year, but they're not because it's the Green Bay Packers, and they're going to get one hell of a prospect anyway. They're going to go ahead and get Brian Branch here out of Alabama. I mean, this is a top 10 prospect in my eyes, and the reason why he's here at number 15 is because I'm not sure which team in the top 10 would take him, but I mean, the versatility that this guy provides, I mean, there are certain schools that they tend to have good players at certain positions. So Alabama, definitely the secondary. I think like LSU specifically the cornerback spot, Iowa with the tight ends, Notre Dame with the offensive linemen. The list goes on. I think you're going to get a good player coming out of the secondary here from Alabama, and Brian Branch is just, I mean, a phenomenal prospect. I mean, I hate to give him to the Packers because that's the team that I hate more than anything else. But, I mean, Brian Branch is just a solid football player. I mean, you put him at safety, you put him at corner, play him in the slot, man-to-man, blitz, in the box. He can do it all. This is like the Swiss Army knife at the defensive position here in this year's draft. So, absolutely love Brian Branch. Not enough, time to say all the good things I want to about him. But it would absolutely hurt me if he went to the Green Bay Packers because I know he's going to be an absolute dog. Here for the Washington Commanders here. Now, this is a team that could potentially be in the mix for taking a guy like Anthony Richardson. But, spoiler alert, Anthony Richardson is not going to be in this first-round mock draft. Look, I love Anthony Richardson. I think he has a tremendous arm. I think his athletic ability is better than majority of the quarterbacks that are already in the NFL. However, because, I mean, he has such a high ceiling, but his floor, I think, is also the lowest of any quarterback in this year's draft. And I think that that's a huge risk for teams to take. Is it one that someone might be willing to take? Yeah, maybe. I mean, we won't know for a few more months. But just because, this could be a guy who could be, so bad, you might not want to start him type deal. That's a little scary to be taken in the first round. So I do, feel a lot more comfortable if I was a team taking Anthony Richardson, maybe in the second, possibly the third. I mean, I can't imagine that, but in that second round range, I just think that the first round is just too early to take him here. So we are going to just address other positions right now, and maybe Washington goes on and gets another veteran quarterback, or maybe they just rock with Heineke or Wentz again. We're going to just build the roster around them right now. We're going to go ahead and take Cam Smith, who is my number 2 cornerback in this year's draft. That might be a hot take for some of you guys, but I think Cam Smith has the best ball skills, tracking the ball down in this entire draft. Just an absolute dog. Plays with that cornerback mentality and swagger that you really want. He's a very, very confident dude, and for good reason. He can keep up with any receiver you put him up against. And like I said, when the ball is up in the air, you can be confident that he's going to find it, swat it down, even pick it off. I know that he had a down year this past season for South Carolina, but is a really good player nonetheless. I really like Cam Smith. I think this is going to be a really good pickup here if the Commanders can get him here at 16. Because obviously, I feel like he should be going much higher. I know a lot of people don't feel the same way, but hey, this is my channel, my opinion. So we're taking him here at number 16. I actually set my bias aside for the most part. I mean, I could have taken him where we took, who was it first? Was it Christian Gonzalez at number 7? I could have taken him there, but we set it aside. Now here for the Pittsburgh Steelers, we are going to go ahead and take that offensive tackle in Broderick Jones, as we were talking about before. I think they also have a huge need at cornerback, but I think right now, considering the guys who are probably going to go in the first round, and I think that is the last of it, most likely, Broderick Jones, they need to go out and get a tackle. I mean, you need to make it an emphasis to protect your young franchise quarterback. They haven't done a great job of that in the first year with Kenny Pickett, so they need to address that. Look, just because I said Broderick Jones is more of an agile, athletic, out-in-space type of tackle, that doesn't mean he's bad. He was pretty productive and a huge reason why they were able to have so much success on the offensive side of the ball for Georgia this past season. So I think that this can be a really good player, and I think he would be utilized best if you can, kick him out there in some screens and open space and make some second level blocks. So I really like Broderick Jones out of Georgia here for the Pittsburgh Steelers. For the Detroit Lions here, we're gonna see another trade right here. So this one's going to get a little wacky right here. As I pull up the trade information so I know what's going to go through and what's not. So right here, we are going to have the New York Giants trade up with the Detroit Lions here, and I have to give them a first and a third here, and then obviously the first here for Detroit. Oh, they'll accept that right there. Okay. Yeah, we're going to do that right here. Okay, so the New York Giants trade up right here, and I think that that's actually a relatively realistic trade package. I think maybe not. Maybe it was like a first and maybe like a third or a fourth. Maybe it might be a little bit more realistic, but they're jumping 7 spots here, so I think a second could be potentially realistic here. But the Giants are going to go ahead here and get a weapon for Daniel Jones, and I think this is a guy that should be taken so much higher. We're going to go Jackson Smith-Njigba here, and the reason why I didn't take him with the Houston Texans is because Jackson Smith-Njigba has one solid year under his belt and primarily played in the slot. And I don't know if they want to take a slot receiver that early in the draft, but I think teams are going to make the same mistake that they did with Justin Jefferson. I'm not just saying that because Justin Jefferson is a Minnesota Vikings receiver and he's the best in the NFL right now at the position. It's because when Justin Jefferson was coming out of the draft, he was 99% in the slot. And same cases here with Jackson Smith-Njigba. And I think teams are going to be a little bit hesitant to take him. Oh my goodness. I think they're going to make a huge mistake here. And I'm not saying that Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to be Justin Jefferson, but I think where he's going to be taken in the draft and how much talent he truly possesses, I don't think teams are going to get that right where he should be going so much higher. I have a lot of faith in Jackson Smith-Njigba. My comparison to him, or for him right now, is Amon-Ra St. Brown, the receiver at a USC for the Detroit Lions. Ironically, they traded up with the Lions to get Smith-Njigba here, but they need a wide receiver, and I think JSN is the number 1 receiver in this year's draft and is an absolute dog. Okay, here for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, we're going to go ahead and give him my number 1 linebacker in this year's class, and that's Drew Sanders. I mean, this dude is a hard-hitting, physical, smart linebacker, understands coverage, understands gaps, just waiting to make a collision on a football player and get the ball in his hands. This is a big-time playmaker. Lavonte David is going to be a free agent this year. At 33 years old, I'm not sure that they're going to bring him back, and so if they don't, this would be a home run pick here for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Pair him up with the very athletic Devin White. It's going to continue to make this defense really, really good. Obviously, it's going to be a huge loss losing all of that experience with Lavonte David, the very long-tenured Tampa Bay Buccaneer, but this would be a very solid replacement. And Drew Sanders is one of my favorite players that I've watched so far as we go through this draft process. Now here for the Seattle Seahawks here at pick 20, this is where we're going to go ahead and address the interior defensive line spot, and we're going to get Bryan Bresee right here. He's really slipped, in mock drafts, but I think this is a really solid prospect. I mean, I've seen some people kind of trash him and say oh, he's going to be the next Clelin Ferrell in comment sections and stuff. I think Bryan Bresee is a really, really solid interior defensive lineman. He's going to be really disruptive, and yeah, maybe he's not worth being taken in the top 10. I could certainly agree with that, but I think that he's certainly someone who possesses enough talent, enough skills to go in the first round and would be a huge addition here. Bryan Bresee and Myles Murphy stay on the same team here in Seattle. Hey, 2 good pickups here for Seattle in the first round. And here for the LA Chargers, we are going to go ahead and give them a very speedy receiver here in Zay Flowers. This dude is very shifty, does a great job of changing direction, making moves in open space, and is also a deep threat at times too. And, surprisingly, considering that he's a smaller receiver at about 5'9", 5'10", he can go up there and make a jump ball contested catch too. So I really like Zay Flowers, one of the more exciting players in this year's draft. I have him as my number 3 wide receiver in this year's draft. Super, super promising guy right here out of Boston College. I'm really excited to see what he does here. And for the Chargers, it just makes a ton of sense. I think you really need that separator on the offensive side of the ball. Keenan Allen's getting up there in age, and, he's not the guy that he used to be. I'm not saying he's bad, but You can definitely see that the age is slowly starting to kick in for him. Mike Williams is your 50-50 jump ball guy, and I think we need like a serious threat here for the LA Chargers, for Kellen Moore as a new offensive coordinator, for Justin Herbert here, who's still young and developing. I love Zay Flowers here and that match here with the LA Chargers. Next pick here, we're going to continue the run on wide receivers. We're going to go ahead and take Jordan Addison here out of USC, and I would absolutely love this pick because I'm not sure how this offense is going to run under a new offensive coordinator because Greg Roman is gone now, but they need more weapons. I mean, only having Rashad Bateman as a serious receiver, I mean, that's really frustrating. And I can understand why, aside from money, why Lamar might not want to stay. I mean, they really need to give him some weapons to throw the ball and, come from behind if they need to. I mean, this is a team that's so reliant on the run game that when they need to pass, it's almost impossible for them at times because they don't have anyone at wide receiver. So Jordan Addison, former Biletnikoff winner back in 2021, given to the best wide receiver in all of college football, does a great job at the run after the catch, and is a pretty decent short route runner in my opinion. So Jordan Addison can provide a huge boost for this Baltimore offense. Now, the Minnesota Vikings, this was a tough one. I was like, okay, can they potentially trade back at some point? But I just don't see any suitors here at this point for the Vikings. And what we're going to go ahead and do here is take Jalen Hyatt. Now, he's going to be taken later in the first round. I don't even know if he goes in the first round in the real NFL draft, but this is someone that I'm really high on. I just think that, super explosive, big-time playmaker, could definitely work on his route tree a little bit more. But Jalen Hyatt, I mean, he took over games at Tennessee, and I think that truly means something. And it's not like there's a lack of talent, athleticism, or skill with this guy. I mean, Jalen Hyatt's a really talented football player, and you have Keenan McCardell here for the Minnesota Vikings. You see what he's done for Justin Jefferson. I mean, obviously Justin Jefferson did a lot of that on his own, but he always talks about how good of a coach Keenan McCardell is, and I think that he could do great things for another receiver here for the Minnesota Vikings. I don't think Adam Thielen stays, unfortunately, as he is stuck on my wall here as we speak. But man, you pair up Jalen Hyatt and have him as a number 2 receiver with Justin Jefferson, this offense can be taken to an even higher level than they were this year. Yeah, I like the pick here, obviously, as a Minnesota Vikings fan. Here for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, we're going to go ahead here and take a very talented tight end here in Michael Mayer, and it's really close for me between him and Dalton Kincaid, but we're going to go ahead and take him here. And, I really scratched my head when I saw Jaguars fans say this, but then I saw more Jaguars fans saying, yeah, like we really could use a tight end, and it really surprised me because I was like, well, Evan Engram had a really solid year. I mean, I can't imagine you won't sign him back, but I guess they really like their tight ends there, and understandably so with Doug Peterson running the system there. You pair Michael Mayer up with Evan Engram, and you have Calvin Ridley, Zay Jones, Christian Kirk. Man, Trevor Lawrence is going to have options now. Michael Mayer, really solid tight end. Does a really good job with the run after the catch, as does Kincaid. We're going to get to him in a second. A little bit of foreshadowing right there, but I think he's going to be a really solid blocker as well. Has really solid hands and was arguably Notre Dame's best weapon this year. Huge target, someone that's going to be really reliable in the passing game and the run game as well. So I really like Michael Mayer here in the first round to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Here for the Detroit Lions, we're going to go ahead and take Lucas Van Ness out of Iowa here. I think this is a guy who has, a little bit more size for that edge rusher spot. And so you can still allow a guy like James Houston to be in the mix at the pass rushing spot, maybe even starting. And this guy can play like your 3 tech in that 3-4 system there that they're running for the Detroit Lions. So I think that this could be a very beneficial pick because I think he can also be really versatile in this defense. So I like Lucas Van Ness here. Very physical football player. Possesses a little bit more size. Like he would be a bigger built edge rusher, but like I said, could play on the inside of that defensive line. And even though he might be a little bit undersized for that position, I think his physicality can make up for that. And so I think this is a very versatile and very useful pick here for the Detroit Lions at number 25. Would love to give him a linebacker, but already got a lot of backlash for that because apparently they're not going to take one in the first round. So I will take your guys' word for it, and we are going to go with another position here. Now here for the Dallas Cowboys, this is where Dalton Kincaid goes. Now, I really want to get Dak a wide receiver, right? But I'm looking at this list right now. I'm just not really feeling it. I'm not really feeling it here at number 26. And so what we're going to go ahead and do here is that we're going to take Dalton Kincaid, who I think is a better prospect than any of those wide receivers that are on the board right now. I mean, Kincaid has the athletic ability, and, he's sort of like that wide receiver at the tight end spot, but doesn't lack any of the size where he's going to be any, less useful than some of the more, prominent tight ends in our league, like, George Kittle, Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce. Like, he possesses that same size and physicality in the run game, and then also super good in the passing game as well as a receiver. So I really like Dalton Kincaid. Here's another option for Dak Prescott. Dalton Schultz is going to be a free agent this year, so I'm not sure if they're going to bring him back, but this would be a great pick here for the Dallas Cowboys at number 26. Y'all can get mad at me if you want, if you're a Dallas fan, but you never watched my mock draft, which is why it got deleted, unfortunately. I'm very sad about that. So, yeah, that's that. Here for the Buffalo Bills. Not going to waste too much time on this one. Bijan Robinson, who is the consensus number 1 running back in this year's draft. I think there's a legit shot that he could go much higher than this in the draft. I just don't know where teams are going to be valuing him as a prospect, just because running back has sort of lost its value in the early first round. But if they can land him here at number 27, this will shore up any run game problems that they've ever had. Singletary is going to be a free agent, so I mean, you can have Robinson and James Cook. I mean, I think that would be a pretty good duo, and would definitely shore up a struggling run game right now for the Buffalo Bills. And he would probably be the leading rusher on the team, not Josh Allen this year, so that would certainly be something. Here for the Cincinnati Bengals, we're going to address the interior of the offensive line. Would love to get him a tackle, but, as I mentioned before, I'm not super positive, and I am going to give another team a tackle later on, but it's just because I feel safer about this prospect. Like, on my big board, I feel like O'Cyrus Torrence at this point in the draft is better than any of the tackle prospects that are on the board now. Now, that's sort of a lie in a way, where it's like I really like Darnell Wright, and I would take him in the earlier first round, but just because I haven't seen him projected a ton in the first round, I wouldn't want to waste an entire selection on a guy who's most likely not going to go in the first round, just because, I feel like it, and that's my bias towards him, and so I want to keep it sort of realistic in a way. I think right here, O'Cyrus Torrence will go here to the Cincinnati Bengals. I think this is a very good guard prospect, and number 1 for sure in this year's draft, at least as a prospect, from what we've seen right now. But they could certainly shore up that interior of the offensive line, that guard spot right now. He does play right guard currently for the Florida Gators, and is a hefty 340 pounds. So I think that he's a really good build for the position, and I think he's going to be a solid pick here for the Cincinnati Bengals, who still need to make it an emphasis, in my opinion, to protect Joe Burrow. Now, here for the New Orleans Saints here, we're going to go ahead and give him a wide receiver here. I know, as I said, but like I said, Dalton Kincaid is higher on my board than any of these guys. My next best receiver, Rashee Rice. They just need to get another receiver to pair up with Chris Olave, and for whoever the quarterback is going to be, maybe it's going to be Derek Carr, but that is that. They just need to go out and get another receiver. They're just really thin at the position, and again, as I mentioned before, Anthony Richardson, ceiling very high, floor is extremely low. Don't see him taken here in the first round. Here for the Philadelphia Eagles, their second pick, I'm going to go ahead and give them an edge rusher to continue that rotation that they've sort of wanted to build up recently. I'm going to give them Will McDonald here of Iowa State. Obviously, as you can see, I had to scroll a little bit here to find him. I think he's a very underrated prospect coming out of this year's draft, and is a guy who's extremely physical and just attacks and attacks and attacks. Very high motor player, can win with his speed, can win with his power. You're banking on the upside on this one. Wouldn't be starting immediately in Philadelphia, but I think would get enough snaps to sort of develop and take the reins at some point. I really like Will McDonald as a sort of project player here late in the first round. So someone that I'm really excited to see whether he develops well or not in his time in the NFL. Will McDonald is someone that I would certainly bank on here. Now, as I mentioned before with the Cincinnati Bengals, as I'm kind of contradicting myself here late in this year's, or in this specific mock draft here, we're going to go ahead and take DeJuan Jones right here. I think that his draft stock is slowly going to rise up just because, you watch him, he stands out on the offensive line as a super big dude, and he does need to work on just his overall speed, just getting out there more, because you have a speedy edge rusher coming across. He's going to be somewhat easy to beat, but has the length, has the size, certainly be a very, very good tackle, is a right tackle. And so let's say Kansas City brings back Orlando Brown, maybe on a short-term deal, and then you also replace Andrew Wiley, who's also going to be a free agent this year, with DeJuan Jones. I think this would be a pretty solid pickup. But as I mentioned before, right, you say, okay, well, why didn't you take him here for Cincinnati? I think Cincinnati could use both an interior offensive lineman and a tackle just as much, and I do have O'Cyrus Torrence higher on my board than a DeJuan Jones, which is why I took him there for Cincinnati. But either way, both of these teams I think could, improve their offensive line. They're both going to do it here in the draft. Things can change a lot from now. It's a very early mock draft here in February. So, again, a lot can change. Now, there are only 31 picks in the first round, but this website wants to do all 32. So this is technically the first pick in the second round, despite it being the 32nd pick this year in the draft. But we're going to go ahead and address that cornerback spot, which I think they desperately need some more talent and depth at. And we're going to go with Eli Ricks here, here out of Alabama. We're going to save this mock draft right here, and we're going to review it in a moment. But Eli Ricks, I think, is someone that's really underrated at this point, and, initially played for LSU, transferred to Alabama, was productive, in both schools. So I really like him there. I think he's someone that could potentially sneak into the late first round, but I think somewhere in the second round is more likely to happen. So that is my 2023 mock draft with trades post Super Bowl edition. We had 4 trades right here. 3 of them were for quarterbacks. 1 of them was for the number 1 receiver in my eyes, and Jackson Smith-Njigba. Again, these trades are not realistic at all. This is just for the sake of having them go through on the website. If you guys were watching, you guys, saw my explanation for what I think is a true value for all of these trade packages here. But here it is, guys. Bryce Young, Will Anderson, Will Levis. Again, Will Levis, you're banking on the upside right here, taking him this high. And I've seen him, go really high in these mock drafts. So I think that there is a real chance that he could be the second quarterback taken in this year's draft. Carolina trades up for their guy in C.J. Stroud right there. We see back-to-back corners, back-to-back edge rushers. Very, very talented cornerback class this year. So we have 3 guys right here going in the top 10 with Witherspoon, Gonzalez, and then Porter. We see a little bit of a run on offensive tackles here, starting with Anton Harrison, who I feel like is the most physical offensive lineman in this year's draft, down to Paris Johnson, the left tackle for Ohio State. Brian Branch falls to 15, and the Packers continue to take defensive players in the first round. JSN goes 18 here to the New York Giants, which I think is just an absolute robbery. Then we have another run on wide receivers here, starting with Zay Flowers down to Jalen Hyatt. And then we close it off here, 2 tight ends, and then we start addressing the trenches a little bit more. So, if you guys enjoyed this draft, again, please consider subscribing. We are on the road to 600 subscribers. All we do is mock drafts here. All we do is talk about the NFL draft. And until then, I'll see you guys all later. Peace.